Welcome back to Mike Seibert Radio. I am your host, and in this special bonus episode, I am going to give a little more of an insider advice peek, I guess, at not just TFCon, but also kind of conventions in general, inspired by some of the feedback and questions that I got from the audience, and kind of giving you a peek behind the curtain. This is a companion piece of sorts to my TFCon LA 2022 recap episode, which you can go back and listen to. Basically, what happened was I started recording this advice, and kind of talking about kind of conventions as a larger, more abstract concept before getting to my actual recap. And once I realized how much I had recorded, I realized that there's enough material to kind of warrant its own space for folks, especially that wanted to get right into the recap. So rather than bogging that episode down with kind of a Convention 101 chapter, I thought I would break this out separately, and you can enjoy that now. I actually want to start with a message I got on Twitter. I saw it on my way back home to Seattle after TFCon, and I think this message is actually a really good jumping off point for this conversation, and kind of a entree into my experience with TFCon. And as a reminder, you can hit me up on Twitter. I am at Mike Seibert Radio, but this message comes from Josh Powell. He's a actor and a singer, a terrific opera voice, but he writes, first off, long time, first time. I've become a huge fan. I was so glad to see that you will be doing a follow-up recap of TFCon LA. I was hoping you might be able to give a short crash course on going to a convention. I got back into Transformers entirely due to COVID, and I've never been to any con of any kind. I'm feeling like Chicago might have to be my first, but I have no idea what to expect. I'm sure I'm not alone in this, and a veteran like you seems like the perfect person to pod Sherpa noobs like us. Either way, love the show, love your social media feed, safe travels home. Signed, Josh J. Soups. So first of all, thank you, sir, and thank you for being my friend. I appreciate all those likes I see out there on Twitter. So I've talked about this before, but since every podcast is someone's first podcast, it's a good reminder. First of all, TFCon is the world's largest fan-run Transformers collectors convention. The event features the world's largest dealer room for specifically Transformers merchandise, guest question and answer panels, and autograph sessions, a third-party product presentation, Transformers trivia, and a Transformers costume contest, and tons more. TFCon is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year in 2022, with events happening in Los Angeles, Toronto, and Chicago. Now, if you'd like to learn more about the history of TFCon, you can check out my interview with Colin Douglas from a few years ago. I had him on shortly before TFCon Chicago. I had never attended a TFCon before, and I thought I would go to the source and ask the founder about it. It was a great conversation, and gives a lot of the history that I'm not necessarily going to get into here, but there's some good stuff there. But the primary thing to understand about TFCon is that it's a fan-run event, and it isn't supported or endorsed by Hasbro. Part of that, I would imagine, has to do with the partnership that TFCon has with several third-party dealers. It's hard for Hasbro to get behind a convention based on selling unlicensed transforming robot toys that infringe on their intellectual property. Third party, by the way, is that's kind of like the nomenclature slang, I guess, for unlicensed robot action figures in the style of Hasbro's Transformers. So, but I had friends of mine at work today. This was my first day back at work, and they were asking me about the convention this last weekend, and I basically had to explain from zero. So I guess I'm already kind of in a recappy state of mind. So like when I talk about celebrity guests, I'm doing the air quotes. You can't see it on the podcast, but when I talk about celebrity guests, it's all relative, I suppose. So it's not like you got yourself like a Shia LaBeouf or a Mark Wahlberg or a Haley Steinfeld. Not necessarily that caliber of celebrity guests. The celebrity guests include voice actors, writers, comic book creators, media guests, fan artists, and toy dealers primarily. But anyhow, as far as a crash course on TFCon goes, like Jay Soups asked, it starts with fundamentals, and this is whether it's a fan convention like Transformers, or like TFCon, or if it's something more huge and elaborate, like say like a WonderCon or Emerald City Comic Con, or God forbid like a San Diego Comic Con. It all starts with fundamentals. And what I mean by that is kind of like foundational planning, the basics. TFCon typically has a partnership with the hotel the convention will be held. They'll generally offer a blocked off section of hotel rooms for pretty decent discounts. I would recommend jumping on those early. You don't really lose anything by booking ahead, and I would recommend staying at the hotel the convention is at if that's financially viable for you. I've had friends stay at adjacent hotels or Airbnb or other offsites, which is fine, but in my opinion, if you want the fully immersive experience, you probably want to stay on site, because there's more to the con scene than the convention itself. I'll come back to that in a minute, but yeah, I suppose I would say that there's more to the con than meets the eye, especially if you're traveling. Now, I've talked about this in other places as well, but I live in Seattle, and I have been attending Emerald City Comic Con since its inception back in, 2002, 2003, something like that. Over 15 years, I know that. And for me, since it's a very large pop culture convention in my backyard, I've taken for granted accessibility. Like there are times that I'll go after work, or very rarely do I take the weekend off and like specifically like plan around it. It's just something that I do during that weekend, sometimes while I'm doing other stuff. So it wasn't until I started attending TFCons, my first in 2018 when I went to Chicago, that I kind of understood the perspective of traveling for a convention. Like I don't get a hotel room in Seattle. I live near Seattle. So I had never had that experience before, but whereas with traveling to these TFCons, I have a greater appreciation for the immersion of the entire convention-going experience, and I think living so close to Emerald City Comic Con, I'm sure I've missed out on countless stuff, including like late night parties and hangouts and things like that, concentrating more fully on the show floor, which, as I'll kind of get into some of my personal recap stuff, is sure I was there for that. I'm not going to say I wasn't, but primarily I was there to be social and interact with people and see friends. Whereas here at home in Seattle, going to those ECCC shows, I was really more focused on show floor activities. So I guess that's one of the biggest differences for me from a personal perspective, going from larger conventions here in Seattle, and then traveling to inarguably smaller fan-run conventions for TFCon. But I guess back to TFCon, and so they'll have like a block of rooms that they have designated for discounts, and again those are really good rates. So jump on those when you can, because they are finite. So and they're generally dated too. So when the hotel block comes up, it'll say okay, well, it closes at this time, so don't get left in the cold if you're traveling. TFCon usually also has partnerships with airlines for flights, discounts on flights. Me personally, I've found booking my own flights to be just as economical, but your mileage may vary. I ended up getting a screaming deal on Alaska and on a flash sale, and I wouldn't have seen that if I had jumped on the hotel discount. Counting on a flash sale is not a sound strategy. I'm just saying it's a happy coincidence for my personal experience. But from there, once you kind of get your hotel and travel booked, I guess in the time leading up to the convention, you'll see various guests added to the lineup gradually to entice folks to want to go. TFCon social media presence is generally pretty good with regards to spotlighting high-profile guests, like voice actors, media guests, and the more popular comic book creators. I have some separate issues with that as well, but I'll address that later. But the thing you won't be able to do is actually plan out what you're going to do at the actual convention until the week of the show. The full panel schedule and autograph signing times for the media guests generally isn't finalized until the last possible minute. And I'll be honest, I used to find that incredibly frustrating. Having been to those larger conventions put out by mega corporations, you'll know weeks or maybe even more ahead of time when the panels are going to be, and get a sense for planning wise what you're going to do. But now, having been to several TFCon shows, I guess I've kind of gotten used to it, I suppose. I do still see folks on both Facebook and Twitter saying hey man, I don't see the schedule, and going from a novice to a, I guess, sort of veteran at this point. I always kind of chuckle. I'll be like, oh buddy, you think the schedule is going to be out more than 2 weeks before? Let me tell you about that time I jumped on a plane to Chicago, participating in a panel, not knowing what time that panel was actually going to be, and I was part of the presentation. So it can be very frustrating, especially for folks with kind of type A tendencies that really kind of want to plan things out. But like I said, you kind of get used to it after a while. But regardless, what you can do before you travel is learn what you can about the hotel the convention is at. Are there stores around? Are there places to eat? Maybe even look into some of the hours at some of the restaurants. I kind of got screwed a couple times during my stay in LA because everything closed way earlier than I anticipated. I had a dinner that composed of trail mix and Australian licorice that I had in my backpack that I had saved from the flight because I didn't plan ahead and everything around was closed. But some of those convention center hotels are pretty isolated, meaning there isn't anything around in terms of convenience stores or supermarkets or whatever, and your options might be slim if you don't have a car. So, like, for example, when I stayed in Burbank, the hotel for the convention is literally across the street from the hotel. It's less than a 10-minute walk. So I didn't bother to get a car because there's no reason to. But the flip side of that is that I was isolated, and Uber can be expensive. I guess I would say on the flip side of that, though, is that most of the hotels are also pretty well self-contained with everything you need to survive. Usually having at least one restaurant and bar on site, sometimes more than one, like, cafes, coffee shops, bars, whatever. So I guess, long story short, kind of be aware of your surroundings and kind of know before you go. Now, one of the things I always say is that a little bit of planning goes a long way. And I've also found, though, that I'm much better at giving that advice than taking and following my own advice. But you want to have some kind of plan of what you want to do and what you want to accomplish at the convention. And then be prepared to just straight up throw out that plan as things change. I kind of look at convention planning anymore is kind of being like one of those flappy guys. One of the I know there's a name for them, but like at like the car dealerships where they're like the floppy sock dudes where you turn on the fan and they just like just flappy arms around. And anyway, so like kind of be prepared to have the flexibility for the wind to take you and just kind of give yourself over to it if that's the thing you're looking for. But give some consideration to what you want to do. Do you want to get autographs? You might want to see if there are specific signing times. Are you looking to watch panels? Some of those Q&As might not be a bad idea to know the schedule and to know where your overlaps are going to be. You might have some hard choices to make if the guest you want to meet is signing during the same time as like the costume contest that you wanted to watch, just for example. Kind of having a grasp of your priorities might not be a bad idea, but everyone has their own show. And what I mean by that is like, there's obviously some overlap, but there are folks that are specifically toy collectors. They're on the lookout for those show exclusives or screaming deals or like obscure things to fill out their collection. There are comic book collectors, there's autographs hounds. There's folks that want to buy fan art stuff, folks that might be in the market for soft sound wave content. But the thing that all of these have in common is that everything costs money. Plus, you need to eat and drink too. Now, this is the thing I can give the least amount of advice on, but set some kind of budget, or at least have some kind of idea of how you're spending your money. What I mean by that is a lot of vendors, especially the larger retailers, generally accept cards, credit cards, but don't assume that everyone does. Squarespace, PayPal, those will often have extra fees for both the buyer and the seller. Cash is always king, and cash will always be appreciated. Personally, I do a little bit of both. I use my card for larger purchases, and I use cash as play money on the show floor. I also charge stuff to my room, like restaurants and bars where I can, and when I think about it. I was joking with some folks at the bar during TFCon, and I had said something to the effect of like, when I felt like my cash was running low, that's when I started putting stuff on the credit cards, and oh hey, look, I still have money left. Look, I still have money left. That's not how money works, but the point of that story is just kind of be aware of what you're doing with your finances. If you go into the convention thinking you're not going to buy anything, I hate to tell you, you're going to have no shortage of angst, because you'll probably come across something that you never knew that you wanted that you can't live without. So again, maybe a little bit of budgeting might not be a bad idea. But bring enough cash if you can, so that you don't get nailed with ATM fees, if you can even find one. And maybe some lower denominations as well, ones, fives, tens. The artist selling prints isn't a bank and might not be able to break larger bills, especially early in the show. If you hit up your bank, you'll probably end up with some big bills to start off with. But try to break those at like as large of a retailer as possible, or at least something that you're spending a lot of money on. Don't buy like a $5 Soundwave button and want to break a hundo. You know what I mean? But wear comfy shoes and wear clothes that are appropriate for the time and place you're going. Don't be a dummy and bring the same hockey sweaters to Los Angeles in March that I wore in Chicago in October like I did. Might not be a bad idea to check the weather before you pack. So, like, for example, TFCon LA was, in Burbank. It's California, but it's California in March. So it's, sunny and 70 degrees in the day. And so it was great running around in shorts, but at nighttime it still gets a little cold. So I still made use of the jeans that I had packed with me. So, and having some clothes to change into isn't necessarily a bad idea. And since we're on the topic of clothes, that's kind of tangentially related to hygiene. And the only thing I'll say about that, since we're kind of coming out of the pandemic, I think we've all learned some terrific reminders about just general hygiene, like, wash your hands, use hand sanitizer, things like that. I was joking with folks earlier that because of the mask requirements for events over 1,000 people in LA County, as well as vaccine requirement, I think we cured con crud, because I haven't been to a convention in the last 15 years where I haven't gotten some kind of illness. We call it con crud, where it's kind of a cold, but it's just like, I don't know, just a crummy, icky feeling. But I got home from TFCon LA this time, and probably the best I have ever felt after a convention ever. So maybe there's something to wearing those masks. But I'm getting a little far afield from what Josh was asking in terms of what to expect. So the convention room is the convention is generally divided into a few main sections. You got the dealer room, you got artist alley, and you got the panel room. Often these spaces will be close together. Other times there'll be some separation, like on a different floor or on the other side of the hotel. But that's generally kind of the what encompasses the convention. Sometimes the artist alley is in the same space as the dealer room, like in Chicago, for example. It's just one big giant room, and then the panel room is directly next to the dealer room. It's very convenient, and it's also directly across from the bar. But what you'll see when you walk into the dealer room is an almost overwhelming assault on your senses. You'll want to go everywhere and look at everything all at once. Now, unless you're on a specific mission when you first walk into the dealer room, I would just say follow what grabs your attention. The centerpiece of the dealer room is the Chosen Prime display. Chosen Prime is a toy retailer and sponsor of TFCon, and their booth is massive, and it's anchored in the center of the room. They've got like these giant cabinets, and they got like lights and a giant logo. It looks. It's the thing that I would say that looks the most like a big convention. Like, you think of like a pop culture convention and you think of like the Marvel booth or the DC booth or the Dark Horse Comics booth or something like that. The Chosen Prime display has kind of that same vibe and feel, and it's kind of like front and center there. But the stuff in their cases, they have like these glass cases. They're really well lit. It's probably going to be the first thing that you see. It's always the first thing I see. But they've got like a terrific selection of like the latest third-party and official Transformers Masterpiece toys. And I realize now I'm sounding like I'm doing a spot read for them or something. Ironically enough, I've never actually bought anything from Chosen Prime, but they're welcome to sponsor my podcast too, if they'd like. Now, there are plenty of other popular retailers as well, many with impressive displays and cases and dioramas and all kinds of cool stuff there. Now, the artists and media guests, those are typically kind of against the wall around the perimeter of the room, and that kind of allows lines or allows space for lines when they form. So like, when I don't know, James Roberts is there signing comic books, there's ample space for folks to line up. So you'll generally see those guests kind of like on the back wall, generally around the perimeter, and you'll see a variety of folks. People from all over the world and from all walks of life and fandom. My very favorite thing about going to Transformers conventions is seeing the amount of people attending that look nothing like me. Like in terms of expectations, when I went to my first TFCon, I just automatically assumed it was going to be a bunch of 40-year-old white dudes. And to my surprise, those folks that look like me are almost kind of the minority at these conventions. I was surprised at the amount of women there, especially young women and girls who are into Transformers. And especially the LGBTQ plus community, or I guess I should say, at least I was surprised until I learned how popular Transformers is with fan fiction writers and shippers. And there's there's some spicy fic and some really fun zines to be found in the fan artist area. And for me, it's just kind of like a light bulb flashing moment. It's like, oh, this all makes sense now. Now I understand. Because I mean, like there's a lot of terrific themes with Transformers that lends itself to diversity and inclusion, and so I could totally understand why this new generation of folks has grafted onto these characters in a way that I never really imagined. I mean, I never really thought of those situations and attitudes the way that I've since learned and been exposed to. But I gotta tell you, fan artists are actually some of my favorite venues at the convention. I don't know. I appreciate DIY ethic. And just the do-it-yourself attitude, and I don't know. The crafting is amazing. I appreciate folks that make stuff. I just think that's so cool. So like if you like buttons and stickers and lanyards and plushies and all kinds of other cool tchotchkes and knickknacks, you'll be able to find some cute stuff there for sure from the fan artists. But one bit of advice: if you see anyone selling plush dolls, especially handcrafted ones, like occasionally there'll be some crocheted ones and lots of embroidery, but don't sleep on that stuff because plushies always go fast. But that does bring me back to a criticism I told you I would bring back up earlier in the show. As much as I appreciate that TFCon gives a space for fan artists, I'm equally annoyed that they aren't given the same treatment as other artists, more mainstream artists. I still, even after going to 4 different TFCon shows in 4 years, have no idea how to figure out which fan artists are going to be actually tabling at the convention. At this point now, I do have a decent following on Twitter, and I'm mutuals with enough creators in the scene, fan artists, to get an idea of who will be there. But I'll be honest, most of my Twitter interaction with fan creators usually comes during and after the actual convention. It's like I've made mutuals with at least a dozen folks coming out of TFCon LA, as I have with each previous TFCon, and I love that interaction, and I love seeing such terrific fan art. But I would love to have the opportunity to know about that on the front end. That way I know who I'm looking for and who I'm going to interact with. Like, I'm still discovering folks on Twitter who I have great conversations with in person. I just wish that there was, I don't know, like some kind of separate page or an index or something for the fan artists and creators to get some of that same recognition as their counterparts in the official space. Like, I don't know. I don't remember seeing any vendors at other conventions just straight up being unlisted. And I'd like to see a listing of vendors also. I mean, meaning like toy dealers and folks like that. I think that would be helpful, and that's something that conventions that are smaller than TFCon I think do very well as conventions that are significantly bigger than TFCon, that are big corporate shows. Just something to where if now granted, I've never had a table at TFCon. I'm not an exhibitor. I'm not an artist, but I would like to think if I was, that there would be some kind of support from the convention to let me know. To let their fans know that I will be at their show. Just to make it easier. Like if I'm paying to be an exhibitor, if I'm paying for an artist alley table, I would like a little bit of extra help from the convention. Now, conversely, I'm not completely naive. I mean, I get that the social media posts coming out of TFCon are meant to attract attention to the convention and be a draw for folks to want to come to the convention. I get that, but why not also spotlight folks who are already coming to the convention and are paying to table there? And I don't want to dwell on it too much. But I do just want to say, for the record, if an artist has had their work published in officially licensed Transformers comic books, they should be considered a quote-unquote official artist. And we're seeing that more and more, especially now with IDW recruiting more fan artists for official work than ever before. And we're not just talking like variant covers. We're talking like, regular covers and a lot of internal pages, interior pages. I guess they're internal pages also. But my point being is like IDW does pay attention to what fans are doing and are recruiting fan artists for official work. So I think regardless of what happens to Transformers comics post when IDW's license ends, I still think that there should be more recognition for fan artists, especially as they're getting more and more official work. I'm just saying that that's something that should be considered. But regardless of all that, I did think of a few other things as well regarding, not just TFCon, but kind of fan conventions in general. And again, best advice, don't forget to wear comfy shoes. You're going to be walking around and standing for long periods of time, especially if you're waiting in line. The lines for folks at TFCon generally move pretty quickly, but sometimes if it is like a big name voice actor or talent, sometimes those lines get pretty long. Like, whenever James Roberts turns up to a TFCon, that's going to be a long line. I was in a particularly long line to see Stan Bush, and the line for Vince DiCola right next to Stan Bush was pretty long, also during those signing times. But when you're in line, don't be afraid to make friends. I mean, you're there to see the same person, right? So you've already got some built-in commonality. When I've gone to other conventions in the past, I call them line buddies. And who knows who you might meet later at the bar. So, I'm a huge advocate for making friends. I know sometimes we're shy and introverted, but we're also at a convention where we're very much out there. So, and like you've heard me say several times before already, I choose friendship. So, hanging out with somebody in line is a good way to strike up some conversation and kindle new friendships. But, with that, while you're at a convention, any convention, I mean, I guess it's life advice as well, but be polite, be courteous, and more than anything, for goodness sakes, be patient, especially if you're going to be at the convention for more than one day. It wears you out, physically and mentally, and after a while, that's where tempers start to flare and nerves start to fray. Be nice. Be patient, and hopefully that courtesy will be returned to you. It might not be a bad idea to bring an empty bag for the stuff you're going to buy. If you have a backpack that's full of stuff already, like comic books or items you want to get autographed, well, then you won't have room for new stuff to buy. So just keep that in mind. Like, just keep like an empty bag in your backpack or something. And, that's just for the show floor while you're out there buying stuff. That's to say nothing about your luggage if you're traveling. Make sure you leave room in your luggage for stuff that you're going to buy. And if you go in with the attitude of planning not to buy anything, you're going to disappoint yourself because you will buy at least something. And you should, buy stuff from artists, buy stuff from dealers, engage in commerce. I mean, not to be all jingoistic about it, but it's good for the economy. It's engage in commerce. But, again, like if you are traveling to the convention and your suitcase is already full, you've already kind of done yourself a disservice and you got a problem. But, be wary of weight restrictions. It's like if you see like, I don't know, like a Fortress Maximus or something like that, give some consideration about how you're going to get it home and how heavy those things are. Like, if I start buying a bunch of Vinyl Tech, that die cast is a little on the heavy side. So you gotta be careful for stuff like that. But Also, don't forget to take care of yourself. Stay hydrated. Don't forget to eat. Low blood sugar is no joke. Take breaks if you need to. Now, I talk a lot about after hours partying and that scene, but please be responsible. Know your limits, or at least be mindful of the consequences. But I mean, just take care of yourself. Being around 1,000 people over a weekend is like being on an airplane. You're just breathing in that same recycled air. It's kind of interesting, and some of these notes I've taken from previous episodes like this that I've done. I've used to do more content related to Emerald City Comic Con here in Seattle. So some of these advice points are kind of universal and kind of dated, but I used to get sick all the time. After conventions, regardless of trying to take care of myself, boosting up on vitamins and things like that. But, we would call it the con crud. But it's interesting, kind of like in the post-COVID, not that COVID's gone, but like in the kind of like a post-COVID mindset with regards to conventions being a thing again, with the emphasis on hand washing and not being gross at the height of the Rona. I'm saying that backwards. How like in 2020. Where, it's like the height of the Rona, and it was all about like, washing your hands and not being gross and, kind of being aware of like those high touch surfaces and things like that. I've joked several times that like, wouldn't it be something if in our efforts to prevent the spread of COVID, we end up eradicating the flu. And that's kind of what happened. Like, in 2021, flu cases dropped like all over the country. It's, it was still there. And, flu's no joke. But it's kind of, it was an interesting, pleasant side effect of emphasis on COVID prevention. And I feel like that's kind of the same thing now that conventions have returned, with emphasis on hand sanitizer stations and folks actively wiping high-touch surfaces. And I witnessed it with my own eyes. I saw folks wiping down door handles and things like that. So there was still kind of that emphasis there, to say nothing about the mask requirements and vaccine requirements. All of that is to say is that I think we eradicated con crud. I can't remember the last time I felt so good after a convention, because I was kind of expecting to, feel like crap for a couple days afterwards, and it just never happened. And I think it has to do with the masks and emphasis on hygiene and things like that. But it's just very interesting. Now, getting back to some advice, and it seems obvious, but it does need to be said. You're going to be on the show floor. You're going to see a lot of cosplay. Cosplay is not consent. Don't be a creeper. Don't be a creep. Ask permission to take photos at all times. Be polite. Be courteous. Don't be that guy. Don't be gross. And don't make cosplayers feel uncomfortable. It's like, I don't know. I think we all need to be more Wayne. It just reminds me of that one scene from Letterkenny where it's like, don't holler at girls and don't talk to girls unless they want to be talked to. That I've got the reference out of order, but you get the idea. Be friendly. And be nice, be polite, be courteous, and always ask permission to take photographs of cosplayers. And more often than not, cosplayers are there to show off their costume and their craft, and more often than not, they'll be more than happy to pose for a photo. And while you're at it, while you're getting that consent and permission to take photos and post them, ask them if they're on social media and what their handles are so you can tag them. Everybody gets more exposure and more friendship that way. But yeah, don't be a creep. Also, don't spend all of your money in one place. It's a long show. keep an eye on what you want, but also be prepared to let it go or to even, in some cases, miss out. Sometimes it's more brave to let something go than to snap something up. Early Saturday is not the day to be wheeling and dealing. Like, if you see something on the table for $100 and say, how about I give you 50? And the response is like, how about you go kick rocks? Saturday is the day to secure your exclusives. Get that early in the show. You're going to get your best deals on Sunday when dealers are deciding if they want to take stuff back with them or if they want to make a sale. That thing that you saw on the table on Saturday for $100, if it's still there Sunday, deep Sunday, hey, would you take 70? So I could take it off your hand so you don't have to pack it up, so you don't got to take it home with you. That kind of thing. But, there's also a middle ground, too. If you wait too long, you could also miss out on that grail that you were looking for. Like the things that I bought, I didn't really deal. Like, I probably could have gotten the person I bought that Vinyl Tech Asterisk alert from, probably could have gotten him to come down in price, but I liked the price that he was asking. So, and I thought it was reasonable. So I just, it was Saturday afternoon and I just paid him what he was asking. But I guess so it's an exciting experience going to the convention, right? And I've given you all kinds of advice and all kinds of tips and tricks and insider info and things like that. But the most important thing, now I think I've said the most important thing at least a half dozen times at this point if you're counting, but this is the truth. This is the advice of record. The most important thing, more than anything else, regardless of all the advice I've given you, the most important advice I can give you is don't forget to have fun. Don't forget to have fun. Visit with your friends and get some stuff autographed and engage in commerce, watch some panels. But whatever you're doing, and it could be a stressful weekend, but don't forget to have fun, because if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. And I think I'll leave it there for now. And that will do it for this week's episode. Thanks as always for listening. And don't forget, you could follow me on social media at Mike Seibert Radio on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'm pretty much equally active on all of those platforms. And you can always write into the mailbag, MikeSeibertRadio@gmail.com. Become a Mike Seibertronian and join the MSRP Friends and Fans Facebook group, and subscribe to the YouTube channel for more videos and extra stuff beyond the podcast. Tune in to the Mike Seibert Radio podcast live stream, happening occasionally on Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook Live. Special thanks to Lucia Fasano for our theme song and to Michael Geisler for our theme music. Check out his stuff at bytormusic.com. My name is Mike. This has been Mike Seibert Radio. And until next time, till all are one, make a choices.
Say you're sorry.
I'm sorry.
Don't honk at girls. And don't holler at girls.
And don't talk to them when they're not interested in talking to you.
And don't talk to them unless they're interested in talking to you.
Done for?
Over and out.